From bureaus worldwide, this is CNA 938 World Report. I'm Benji Haya in London.
And I'm Jagruti Dave in Washington, where a top Trump administration official is suggesting that China may be rife for a popular uprising. Matthew Pottinger is President Trump's deputy national security advisor. In a speech delivered on the 101st anniversary of China's May the 4th movement, which grew out of student protests in Beijing in 1919, he said China today can learn a lot from the movement's struggle. The speech coincided with intensifying Trump administration rhetoric over China's handling of COVID-19, and Beijing claiming that US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is insane. Here's our US Bureau Chief Simon Marks.
From the outset, it was clear this was going to be a very different speech delivered from the White House by Matthew Pottinger, President Trump's Deputy National Security Advisor.
我是 Matt Pottinger. 我带来我的上司，美国第45任总统 Donald J. Trump.
Speaking entirely in Mandarin for the duration of his 25-minute comments, he seized on the 101st anniversary of the May 4th movement. In 1919, with protests that started in Beijing, it was a critical moment in the country's uprising against imperialism and feudalism, a protest movement that Chairman Mao would go on to say played a critical role in China's eventual communist revolution. And Mr. Pottinger said that legacy of 101 years ago is evident in Wuhan today.
如今中国五四精神在哪里呢?
Who embodies the May the 4th spirit in China today? To my mind, the heirs of May the 4th are civic-minded citizens who commit small acts of bravery, and sometimes big acts of bravery. Dr. Li Wenliang was such a person. Dr. Li wasn't a demagogue in search of a new ideology that might save China. He was an ophthalmologist and a young father who committed a small act of bravery and then a big act of bravery. His small act of bravery in late December was to pass along a warning via WeChat to his former medical school classmates that patients afflicted by a dangerous new virus were turning up in Wuhan hospitals. He urged his friends to protect their families. His death on February the 7th felt like a loss of a relative for people around the world. Dr. Li's comment to a reporter from his deathbed still rings in our ears. I think there should be more than one voice in a healthy society, and I don't approve of using public power for excessive interference.
And his lionising of the example set by Dr. Li led Mr. Pottinger to conclude that China may now be at another inflection point in its history. Again, the Deputy National Security Advisor speaking in Mandarin.
When small acts of bravery are stamped out by governments, big acts of bravery follow.
He did not explain exactly what big acts of bravery he envisages taking place in China, but he asked a series of rhetorical questions that indicated the direction of his thinking.
As the May the 4th movement today marks the inaugural year of its second century, what will its ultimate legacy be? It is a question only the Chinese people themselves can answer. The May the 4th movement belongs to them. Will the movement's democratic aspirations remain unfulfilled for another century? Will its core ideas be deleted or distorted through official censorship and disinformation? Will its champions be slandered as unpatriotic, pro-American, subversive? We know the Communist Party will do its best to make it so.
Mr. Pottinger's appearance took place at a forum hosted by the University of Virginia's Miller Center. And once the speech was over, in English this time, responding to questions, he insisted that he wasn't trying to foment a modern-day revolution in China.
How China governs itself is going to be up to the Chinese people. It's not for anyone else to decide. The May 4th movement belongs to the Chinese people. There's a lot that we've learned from it. But it belongs to them, and the speech today was really just an attempt to remind a current generation of friends of the United States and in China and elsewhere of the legacy of that movement.
For the most part, Mr. Pottinger played his cards close to his chest. He was asked whether the governing arrangements in Taiwan might eventually serve as a future model for the mainland. And in answering, he picked his words very carefully.
Taiwan has been a pretty astonishing example of, shows sort of the bankruptcy of the claim that China is not ready, or Chinese people aren't suited to democracy and so forth. That's not to say that that's what we're foisting on anybody.
And in contrast to others in the Trump administration, he was skeptical about the prospect of America seeking financial reparations or other penalties against China for covering up the existence of coronavirus, as his boss, the president, has claimed.
The U.S. isn't looking at punitive measures here. What President Trump is looking at doing is continuing with the policy that he ran on, the policy that he's implemented, which is to have a reciprocal and fair relationship with China.
That is not in keeping with the latest bellicose language of both President Trump and his Secretary of State. Mike Pompeo said over the weekend there is enormous evidence that COVID-19 was concocted in a Wuhan laboratory and that China must pay the price.
We can confirm that the Chinese Communist Party did all that it could to make sure that the world didn't learn in a timely fashion about what was taking place. There's lots of evidence of that. Some of it you can see in public, right? It's the way communist parties operate. This is classic communist disinformation. President Trump is very clear. We're going to hold those responsible accountable.
Chinese state media called the Secretary of State insane and accused him of wantonly spewing poison in that interview on ABC. On Sunday night, in the shadow of the Lincoln Memorial during a Fox News television special, President Trump offered his own evolving commentary on Chinese responsibility.
Well, I don't think there's any question about it. We wanted to go in. They didn't want us to go in early, very early. You'll see that because things are coming out that are pretty compelling now. Don't forget, China tried to blame it first on some of our soldiers. That turned out to not go too far. And I really got very upset with that. That was not right. And then they tried to blame it on Europe. And, you know, when I put a ban on, those people went, for the most part, not here. And I'm not happy about this. It's terrible because it's life, whether it's here or Europe. But we put a ban on very early on China coming in. They went to Europe. Most of those people went to Europe. That's why Italy was so badly affected. And you just see what they're going through. China tried to blame Europe for this.
With every day that passes, the Trump administration is intensifying its rhetoric towards China, in whichever language, English or Mandarin, that it chooses to use. I'm Simon Marks in Washington.